Today, I'm talking about the definitive way to light shots outdoors using only natural light. Shooting outside can be very difficult because you have to deal with the sun. You have to use it one way or the other. I prefer to use the sun as a backlight and not as a key light. You might think this is counterintuitive because the sun is the source of light, and why wouldn't you just use it as a key light? Well, I don't use it as a key light for a couple reasons. One, on its own, it's extremely harsh. Two, it washes everything out, including the background. Even if you were to soften up the key light, you would just have a really high key image, which might not be bad and it might be exactly what you need, but in most cases, I don't prefer it and I don't usually do it if I can help it. The first thing you want to do is take your subject, put them between the camera and the sun so that they are backlit. Having your subject backlit by the sun is also very beneficial for creating depth and interest in the background because the sun does the same thing on the subject everywhere. Trees are backlit, foliage is backlit, buildings in the background are backlit. You get a really nice edge light, which takes care of the hardest part of working with natural light, and that's getting separation. It's also much easier to balance the scene if you have a brighter hair light and you just move the sun around on the front of the subject compared to dealing with all that brightness on the subject's face, and then having no way to really separate them from the background. You're gonna wanna get something up in the sky to diffuse the sunlight that's coming in, so it's not as harsh hitting their backs. I use a 2x3 silk in this scenario, and that does a great job of just taking the edge off of that really bright highlight and moving it closer to something that's much more manageable and much more pleasing on camera. A good tip for when you do this is to look at where the shadows line up so that you can get the right position. Once you send this silk high in the sky, it can be frustrating to keep finagling it around until you get it right. But if you look at where the subject's shadow is that they're casting, and then you put the 2x3 silk up into that shadow, you'll get them to match up perfectly. Now we have an image that looks like this, which looks tremendously better, and it's already pretty much a complete image. You could rock with this. But there's a couple things I would do to keep pushing this image and getting it to that next level. The next step is going to be to shape this subject's face. And by shape, I mean really control the way the light moves across the face. And this is something that really can separate your work from other people's works and stuff that's just shot because you had to do it. And this is more control, and control is everything. I say control all the time. I'm gonna say it in every single video that I make because control is key. Without control, you are not making films. You are just shooting video. That's the difference. So the first thing I'm gonna do to initiate some higher level of control and introduce more shape is use negative fill. Negative fill is anything dark, really. There are certain materials that are good for negative fill, like duvetine, which is a heavier, more opaque, black material, but you can get away with just about anything. I've seen people use black t-shirts in a pinch. Negative fill does a couple things. The thing that it does the most though is it stops light from returning and it soaks up any light going past the subject. The result is introducing a clean, cohesive shadow along the subject's face. When I first learned about negative fill, it changed everything. That was the secret sauce that I was missing. That's what I would look at images and I would make images trying to replicate it and be like, why doesn't it look the same? It's because I didn't know about negative fill. And negative fill is so very important because it's really what allows you to create that cinematic shape, that contrast that everybody's looking for. It allows you to control lighting ratios, which is that next step into managing a look across an entire scene or an entire movie. Negative fill works in a couple ways. Size is usually the best. The bigger, the more effective it's gonna be, the more it's gonna show up on camera. And when you're working outside, you do want something of considerable size because it won't really register on camera otherwise. If you don't have something that big, you gotta get it as close as possible. In some scenarios, this may mean shrinking your shot down to something that you can manage. That might mean tightening up a lens or physically moving the camera closer so that you don't see as much and you can get the negative fill closer to their face. Now we have an image that looks really pretty dang good, but there's still more that can be done. The last thing we're gonna wanna do is add a bounce and wrap that sunlight that's hitting our subject as a backlight and put it back onto the face, moving left to right. So this means putting it to camera's left, subject's right, and just finding that angle where it's pushing light kind of on a sidey angle and not too frontal. If it's too frontal, it'll kind of destroy the shape I started to create by using negative fill and having the subject stand at 3/4. Make sure that you put sandbags on these stands because when you put fabrics in the air, It's very, very easy for wind to catch them and just knock everything down, and that's very unsafe, and you don't want anybody to get hurt while you're making films. On wide shots, you're just gonna have to get a large negative fill. And that's it. Those are the only things you have to do to get a really good, really confident, repeatable workflow that will net you positive and professional results every single time. You can do this anywhere in the world and it'll always look good. And it's really quite simple. All you need is a bounce and negative fill and a couple stands. That is the definitive way to light outdoors using nothing but natural light. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.